Professor of Russian Studies here at Stetson University in DeLand, Florida, and I'm joined by a couple colleagues to talk about an upcoming tour that it will be presented by SRAS and Stetson University, and led by one of my interlocutors today. You see there Professor of History at Stetson University, Martin Blackwell. And you also see Dr. Mayhill Fowler, Professor of History at Stetson University here in DeLand, Florida. And we're going to talk today about the course and tour that are being led by Martin Blackwell this summer 2021. And I'll let Dr. Blackwell say a few words about who this tour might appeal to, give us some details about when it's going to take place and where it's going to take place, and talk a little bit about the hows, things like transportation, meals, and then we'll have a broader conversation about the topic of the course and the tour, which is the collapse of communism, which happened in winter of 1991, if I'm not mistaken. I'm not a historian. So I'll turn things over to Martin. Can you give us sort of an encapsulation of the course and the tour that's going to take place this coming summer 2021?
Hey, thanks, Michael. Yeah, I mean, this summer, we hope it's going to go. We're optimistic. It's designed for anybody at Stetson, really. There's no Russian language requirements. It's designed to take you to some really great places, right? We're going to start in St. Petersburg. We're going to then go on to Moscow. We're going to see some of Eastern Europe with Warsaw, and or Central Europe almost with Berlin, and then finish up in Kiev. This is the effort here really is to look at is to throw everybody into what life was like even really in the Russian Empire to begin with, because we'll start in St. Petersburg, and we'll also look at what life was like in the Soviet Union in Moscow, and then we'll begin to take a look at why it unraveled, and we'll do that from the perspective of the Eastern Europeans and why they were ready to go and ready to jump the gun once they were given the opportunities to escape being Soviet satellites. And that will be key because we will finish in Ukraine, and Ukraine's going to help us try to understand why the Soviet Union collapsed from within. That will be our sort of like triumphant last week of a 4-week program where we look at why it was that the place couldn't reform itself, why it couldn't get out of the rut that it was in, and why a place like Ukraine decided to go on its own. Right when you mentioned there, Michael, in December of 1991. So this is an effort that is designed to show everybody, particularly, I mean, people who are taking my course as freshmen and sophomores here at Stetson, and anybody from across the country, of course, who also wants to go. It's going to get their feet very wet very quickly. And it's an ideal first sort of moment to get yourself involved with this space. And I think all of us here on the screen would agree that without trudging the streets there, without and of course they're a lot nicer than they used to be, these streets. You really are missing out. And if you really want to get hooked on the place, this is how you do it. And I wouldn't be, as it says on the site there, if you ever go look at the SRAS Winds of Change website, it says that, I wouldn't be doing this if I hadn't been somebody who'd been on study abroad myself 30 years ago this year. So I'm really excited about it, and I'm excited to be here at Stetson, where there's such a good program, and we've got our strong Russian language capabilities. What we really need right now is 10 volunteers, dobrovolci volunteers who are 12 maybe even, who want to join me. And we've got great support, finally, I'll say. Great support from SRAS. We really couldn't design a program that was any more accessible as far as price goes for you guys. We've got world scholarships. We've got, for the Stetson students, we've got SPRAS scholarships, possibly. We can think about that. And SRAS has its own monies, of course. So we've designed a program which builds off of SRAS's logistical and cultural and academic support within each of these cities, which they have, of course. And so that's going to make my life a lot easier. And it's, we've got some pretty nice places to stay. I mean, we've got some great food that we're going to eat. There's like 4 or 5 or 6 meals, I think, or like a special dinners that are embroiled into all of this to help you guys get a sense of the importance of food for these cultures across the map. And I'm just really excited. So that's the news there. You can read all about the logistics and the prices, and we'll do some internal flights, right, from Moscow to Warsaw, and then from Berlin over to Kiev. We'll do an overnight train ride, I should say. That's essential for getting to know Soviet and post-Soviet culture between St. Petersburg and Moscow. So there's a lot involved here, everybody. I mean, we will, but on the other hand, we'll be in each place for about a week. Mm-hmm. And we've got opportunities to meet locals through SRAS's contacts, which they have, and particularly in St. Petersburg and in Kiev, we should have good opportunities to meet some Russians and some Ukrainians. And in Ukraine, of course, there's opportunities to stay on and study Russian if you want to. So that's like a bridge. So this is a month program that begins on May 16th, and goes all the way until June 12th, I believe.
So great. Dr. Blackwell, what kind of visas do students have to worry about?
Well, we only need to worry about Russian visas, and everywhere else is visa-free travel for Americans. And I think the key there is to know that we are dealing with SRAS as our provider, and there's nobody I know more on this planet who knows more about Russian visas than the leadership at SRAS. So they are the best. They are completely glued in, and we are going to be in some unparalleled moments here when it comes to international travel. We don't know. The vaccine will be rolled out here. I think the Russians are very, very much wanting there to be these types of links. They don't want to be isolated in Russia. That's not cool. That's not cool being stuck a long way away from everybody else and isolated in your own little world. They don't want that, and that's very sort of prestigious, right, to deal with these foreigners. And they want to be seen hanging out with foreigners, I think, interlocuting with them. And so I'm hopeful that we will be able to go. And I wouldn't think that the visas are going to be a real obstacle to overcome. They do cost about $275 each. So okay. It could be a little bit less, a little bit more, but around about there.
So talk to me a little bit about academic credit for Stetson students and for students who are not at Stetson University. How's that going to work? What can they expect?
Okay, well, I mean, anybody who going on the freestanding program will earn the equivalent of one course credit here at Stetson. So it's what Stetson calls 4 credit hours, or 4 units, right? Or
it's one unit, 4 credit.
1 unit, 4 credit hours, right? So it's for everybody. Out there in the non-Stetson world, this is a 300 level course because it's going to be very concentrated and smashed together into 4 weeks. We're going to have some exams. We're going to have some readings. We're going to have me lecturing. We're going to have locals lecturing. The books are out there on the syllabus, which I can provide to anybody if they want to buy them early. Of course, there's going to be a few people on the program, I would believe, who are already enrolled in this course, and they will be going. They're enrolled in a spring course, with the same label, and they are then going to addend this summer program onto this course. They won't get any extra credit for going on this program. They'll only still get their one credit, or their one course credit, but they'll have a little bit lighter load academically because they'll have already done quite a bit of work already. So that's good news for them. And we've tried to sweeten the pot in as many ways as we can here. And I've got, I'm happy to say, 18 people signed up for the Soviet collapse, and with one on the wait list. And that hopefully everybody out there should know that we'll have a little bit of maybe even a cohort of 3 or 4 that come out of that group that want to go on the program itself as an addendum. And there are other people out here, other students at Stetson, who've also expressed interest, who are the people I'm talking about are in the course itself are freshmen and sophomores, because it's a 200 level course because of the way Stetson operates, and there are all sorts of politics involved with the numbers that courses have. But I think it's quite liberal, and those freshmen and sophomores will be then joined hopefully by some upperclassmen who are looking for a 300 level course for their curriculum. So, but they'll again have a lot to do, because
so can you
they'll be on the road doing all this work.
Can you go through the sites that the students are going to see during the tour one more time?
Well, okay, yeah, and I labeled. I did the cities, but I didn't tell everybody at all in any way what we would be doing in some of these places. But yeah, I mean, St. Petersburg. The idea there is to see Russia's imperial past and its imperial glory, and we will be visiting the Hermitage, of course, the Russian Museum, things like that. If we'll be taking our train trip. In Moscow, the idea is, yes, of course, we'll see the Kremlin. We'll also get a sense of, obviously, we'll see Red Square and the Lenin Mausoleum, which I think is huge. There'll be some efforts in Moscow to look at World War II's memorials there to get a sense of Soviet achievements. So and Russia's pride in its past. If you think the sort of the really experimental parts of the trip really come when we head off to Poland, and we take a look at the Solidarity movement, and we go to the Solidarity Museum in Gdansk. So this is sort of a really unique aspect to this effort, and it builds off of SRAS's links and connections in Poland. We'll look at like what communism building it meant to Polish people there in Warsaw. And of course, we'll then take the train over to Berlin, 3 or 4 hours, and look at the role of the Stasi, the East German secret police, in keeping it and in maintaining the system's strength there. We'll be visiting the wall, of course, taking a look at that, and that will be the last thing that we do before we head off to Kiev. And in Kiev, I lived there for a good while and have a lot of acquaintances there still. And in Kiev, what we'll be taking a look at is what life was like there in Soviet times, with particularly the role of the river, the role of the beach, even, and we'll take a look, grilling shashlik on the sides there. The really, what a lot of fun that people had in Soviet times, but yet also, of course, we will want to look at the process of them moving and becoming independent and why that occurred. And there are, of course, a lot of things have happened since since Ukraine became independent, and there have been real efforts to democratize the place. So I think everybody needs to recognize that the story here is designed to take us all the way to the present. So that a lot of what we'll be doing is taking a look at what has occurred over the last 30 years as the Soviet collapse sort of plays itself out and continues to reverberate across the space, such that people are taking different avenues and different angles, and they're going off in different directions now, so many years later, and there are quite different sort of outcomes in Russia and in Ukraine, in Poland. All of which reflect like a world importance. In other words, that are not any different from than other types of trends that we see across the world. So we have Putin's authoritarianism, his almost totalitarian hold over that space, and yet, just down 600 miles to the south, we've got this rollicking, free-for-all, democratic space that is Kiev, the new sort of east-west divide, and yet of course in Eastern Europe we have these very think about Berlin. I mean, that's absolutely one of the leading world cities, intellectually, democratically, liberally. It's a font of liberalism, of course. So students are going to not only are we looking at the collapse of communism, the sort of nuts and bolts of how that took place economically, politically, culturally there in the late 80s, but we're also taking a good long look at what this moment teaches us about living everyday life in 2020, 21 in this country itself, right? Where we also debate about the strength of our democracy, and we see challenges to elections, and those of us who study Ukraine, or close to Ukraine, and all three of us are, there have been some really strange parallels between the events of the last month and what we know about Ukraine's life in 2013-14, and of course back to 2004-2005 with the Orange Revolution. So that's the goal with the course. It's as a historian, the last thing I'll say is, I mean, I wouldn't be doing this stuff if I wasn't passionate about the present. Right, and so I hope that we can, together with SRAS, sort of seize that passion and have a real adventure, because not only we'll be real ambassadors. I mean, this is going to be, if this thing does go, this will be a world historical moment in itself.
So I just wanted to clarify before we turn things over and talk with Dr. Fowler, that students who participate in the tour, the part of the class that's in Central Eastern Europe and Russia, Ukraine, they don't have to have any pre-requirements or any taken any classes or speak any languages. Just it's open to anyone. Is that correct?
It is, and I think I recognize that this is a long way away in some cases from the realities that we're living in here in the United States today, and I think sometimes it takes you need to like dive into the deep end in order to recognize that it's something worth studying. So yeah, so everybody's welcome, and some people on the program will have some good background because they'll have been with me.
So I'm going to turn things over and let Dr. Fowler ask some questions based on the syllabus and her own knowledge of the Soviet era, especially in Ukraine and Poland. Hit it, Dr. Fowler.
Well, actually, I just want to draw out a couple points that I think are really important for students to understand. So first of all, Dr. Blackwell, you mentioned in your syllabus Blackwell's own archives as the sources that students are looking at. And you just mentioned that you yourself have lived in Kiev for several years. And I happen to know that after you graduated from college, you went to Russia. And one thing you did was you worked on study abroad programs, or you've had a lot of experience running study abroad programs. Can you tell the students a little bit about kind of your own experience in the study abroad world?
Yeah, I mean, I did run a couple of three, in fact, study abroad programs. I mean, 3 semesters in a row for something known as School for International Training, SIT.edu. And that was in St. Petersburg in the late 90s. And I got out of there just really before Putin himself took over the country. I wasn't surprised by that so much because I'd seen this character in sort of this gray eminence in the background of these various news broadcasts that I'd been watching religiously for a year and a half every night at 7 o'clock. But that Meho, Dr. Fowler, that's built off of previous experience in the 90s where I worked at our embassy in Moscow. And when you say like there's some materials I think on the syllabus where it talks about Blackwell's archives.
Yeah.
So there's like I've got like 65 letters that I wrote home to my mom.
Oh my gosh.
That I have to like those are from the early 90s, from 92 to 94. So I have to do some serious redacting of those things to find anything useful for students. But it does talk a little bit about what I saw on the streets there from, what was it, like October of 92 to September of 94. So I have, some pictures of my own that I like to show because I did a lot of travel across the former Soviet Union across that decade. That was very, very sort of immersive and intense because I had the opportunity to do it, and I did it, and I took a lot of pictures, and it does sort of illustrate what the Russians describe as these days as the frightening 1990s.
Yeah, absolutely.
And there was actually for a while a TV show that was known as the frightening 1990s. Of course, that was put on by Putin's Russia, but to illustrate how great things are these days in comparison. And yet we will be looking at the frightening 1990s while we're in Kiev. So we will. And there'll be chances to do that also in Moscow and in St. Petersburg to take a look at the changes that have taken place in those spaces, since those difficult times.
Yeah, but I think what's so great about this program is that you're leading it and it's your experience, right? That you are coming from a place of you actually lived through this as an outsider, right? But you're a great guide for US.
Yeah, I know these places. I don't know Warsaw that well at all, but the other four towns, cities, I do know, and I know them such that I don't need any maps or anything.
Yeah.
Certainly in St. Petersburg, Moscow, and Kiev, and we can hopefully like walk some of the actual paths that we hear about in some of the texts that we read. Yeah. So like if we take a look at Andrei Kurkov's Death in the Penguin, about life in Ukraine in the 90s, the period that we're talking about at the moment. There are like literally paths that the main character walks that people who live in Kiev take and walk and go to, and so we're going to do that. That's going to be one of the goals of the program, is to really literally put ourselves in the people's footsteps, in their own shoes.
I think what's also really cool about the program that students might not necessarily get immediately is when we teach the collapse in class, we always teach it as not only the Soviet Union, but the bloc, right? Always teach it as Eastern Europe and the Soviet Union and the interaction between them. But very few, I can't think of another study abroad program that replicates that. Right? So most study abroad programs are just Russia, right? Or just Eastern Europe. And to be able to do both and really understand that dynamic between the Soviet Union and the bloc, between today's Russia and Eastern Europe, right? I think is a really incredible experience, because the geopolitics that is happening today is based on that dynamic. Right? I mean, you can't understand Russia without understanding what's happening in Eastern Europe, right? And the fear, right, that Ukraine is drifting towards Eastern Europe, right? And so it gives students the ability to sort of experientially understand the mental universe that policymakers and cultural elites and whomever have today, right? It's not just Russia, it's not Eastern Europe, it's a whole world.
Yeah, I think the fun thing about, well, it's easy for us to say sitting here, in Florida when we look at this space, but we are in 2020. What has basically happened is that we have sort of like reverted ourselves back to the mid 80s. I mean,
Yes.
geopolitically. Now, it's true that the Kremlin doesn't control Ukraine and it doesn't control these satellites. Does it necessarily need to have the same type of control that it did back then in order to be a dominant player? That's another question. But what I wanted to just piggyback off of there is this idea that I think in Moscow and in St. Petersburg, there's certainly a sense that Poland, East Berlin, that these are quite well. I mean, people are living pretty well there. They're enmeshed in the West's existence. It's some sort of place that is not. It's Europe. It's not Russia. And so the same geopolitical dynamics that existed back at the beginning of all this exist now. And but I think it's a moment to sort of like by studying all of this, we can actually get a better sense of where the world is headed.
Absolutely.
Because of course, Putin's Russia that exists right now in some ways is kind of the way that the KGB in the early 80s wanted things to play out. They wanted a totalitarian, authoritarian regime which was living a lot better than it was. And everybody knows that Russia's the standard of living in Moscow or any of these places within Russia, the Russian Federation today, is exponentially higher than it used to be in 1982. Yeah. So they've come a long way materially, and of course, not much has changed politically.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one of the things that you're touching on, kind of the last thing I'd like to really pull out of what's cool about this program, is this idea of the longue durée, right? That the collapse didn't happen overnight. It's not just Gorbachev making his speech and like leaving, right? And the flag coming down. It's actually a process that you really need to understand the Russian Empire, and you need to understand the Soviet experience to understand the collapse. And you need to understand the collapse to understand what's happening today. So it seems like students will get this sense of kind of the richness of the scope of the chronology from this program too.
Right. Yeah, I couldn't agree more with you there. But I'd just add that we will look as much as we want to talk about the longue durée, we also need to look at the sort of the contingencies that existed right there, between 1985, let's say, and 1991, and we will have enough time, I think, to analyze these critical junctures where things didn't end up the way they wanted them to end up from the Kremlin's perspective.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think we would all agree that the Kremlin was not against this idea of Eastern Europe heading off on its own course, which it did, but it was prepared to do so, of course, and other places sort of piggybacked off of that, within the Union itself. So thank you.
And I think what's also great as a Ukrainianist, the fact that you're bringing Ukraine into the story and Eastern Europe into the story and Russia into the story without privileging any of these stories, right? That they're all important and the collapse unfolded in different places in different ways. And I think that's a really important point for students to understand.
Right. We'll try to do it. Yeah. So we've got a lot on our plate, but it's going to be, as I said, the main thing here is it's really going to be historic. And some of us were involved in studying abroad. I don't know if Dr. Denner was there when it was still the Soviet Union, but I mean, we wouldn't be sitting here right now if we hadn't been involved in some historic moments ourselves. And I think students, everybody out there needs to recognize that we are, none of us historians here, we would definitely agree that this is unparalleled and unprecedented, and particularly when it comes to reopening the world now.
Yeah,
history never stops. So just a couple of quick questions to wrap this up. First of all, I think the question that everybody wonders is, this sounds like an incredible trip, 4 weeks in Eastern Europe, Central Europe, and Russia, Ukraine. How much, roughly speaking, will this cost, and what do those numbers cover?
Wow. Well, we have if you look on the website, everybody, the price is at the moment $49.95, I believe,
Yes.
and that includes pretty much everything except for
Airfare.
except for the airfare, and some of your spending monies that you'll need. There will be some meals. All breakfasts are provided, so we're gonna have some hearty breakfasts, hopefully, in these various places that we stay. So I would hope that we've kept it as low as we can go, and everybody will need to like seek out from their home institutions or from Stetson efforts to lower that cost. Again, everybody in my course already, they're going tuition free, so they're saving a little money there. And we've got other opportunities here and hopefully in other institutions and of course within SRAS to bring that number down. So, if everybody could like shoot for making it, trying to chip away there, chip 1,000 off, and then you've got it like basically a free airfare, right? So, I would just say that, for that amount of money, considering what other things cost these days, and just in general traveling to this space, this will be an incredible value.
Yeah. So $1,000 a week, roughly speaking, that's a very reasonable amount of money for an all-inclusive trip like this one.
Yeah, we've got these internal flights, we've got the train, we've got everything's included as far as admissions go. So and just
your expertise and local experts and all the guides and all of that stuff, it's all included.
Right. Yeah, there's no extra costs on the ground there other than buying lunch basically. Right. And things are really in St. Petersburg and Moscow and Kiev, things are very affordable.
Yeah, and so students should definitely reach out to SRAS, which often has some internship or writing for SRAS or sort of ways to kind of lower that cost. Right. Reach out to your home institution. Stetson students should reach out to the World Office. If you're a SPREES major, there are certain opportunities at SPREES. So there are ways to chip away at that cost. But I think it's important to emphasize that is a great cost for this kind of program.
So, and then last two questions. When do people have to make decisions? What's the timeline for that? And who do they contact if they're interested in learning more?
Well, first of all, you can contact me. MJ Blackwell at stetson.edu, and I think that
look down below.
Yeah, there you go. It's on the syllabus there. I think that Dr. Denner included the World Center here, world at stetson.edu. They can help you out. Really, we want to get our group put together by about the 1st of February. Okay, that's that would be ideal, so we would know who's on board and really who's committed at that point in time. And we will then, I think the earlier we can have a committed group, everybody, the earlier we can make our push with the administration here at Stetson, the earlier, who knows, the SRAS can work with its connections. I mean, we may have to call the State Department ourselves. I think the Russians are open to us coming. I think, hopefully we'll have some good news on the vaccine and we can move forward.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Let's wrap this up. Thank you, Dr. Blackwell. Thank you, Dr. Fowler. Michael Denner here. If you're interested in some more information, look underneath this video, and you'll find some websites that you can find out more information on the winds of change, fall of the communism in Soviet Union. And you also find some information for contacting Dr. Blackwell and SRAS directly. Thank you very much for finding some time to talk about the program, Dr. Blackwell, and thank you, Dr. Fowler, for those great questions. And I'll see you soon in our little Zoom boxes. Take care. До свидания.
До свидания.
До свидания.